Episode 7, Hell. This podcast reflects personal memories, interpretations, and opinions. All individuals mentioned are entitled to the presumption of innocence. While every effort has been made to tell the story truthfully and factually, some details may be subjective or based on personal recollection. Listeners should approach the content as a personal narrative, not a formal or factual record. Welcome back to the Spencer Files. In the beginning of October 3rd, 2018, my dad's mom passed away. As if enough wasn't going on already, we had now lost one of the sweetest people in the world. I will always miss her tight hugs, the kind where she squeezed so tight you'd think that she didn't want to let go. And honestly, you didn't want her to either. Even though she was only 4'11", she carried herself with a strength that made her feel taller than anyone in the room. We didn't see her all the time, but we made it happen as much as we could. My dad visited her several times a week. For him, losing her was substantial, a hole that nothing could fill. Over the last few years, probably after her husband, my grandfather, died, I'd gotten to know her better than ever before. I brought my kids over to play, and she would sit with them, focus on them completely, giving them things to do, telling them little stories. She even had this way of turning something very simple, like making music with pots and pans, into a grand adventure. I liked watching her carry my kids around as well, which was funny because by then, they were almost half her size already. She had an infectious laugh, the kind that filled a room and made everything seem lighter. It took me a while to figure out how much that I actually missed her now that she's gone. And I don't think I ever got to grieve properly because of all the chaos going on around us. By the end of the month, my own health had taken a hit. On Halloween night, after having an eye stroke and being admitted to the hospital for a week, I was discharged but had to wear a heart monitor, the kind you press whenever something feels off, but it also recorded suspected events automatically. After what had happened with my eye, my doctors were crystal clear. The one thing I had to avoid more than anything else was stress. Telling me that works about as well as when I tell my wife to calm down. But I still had to try. And it worked for a while, but it didn't stay away for very long. Soon after, my mom was on her way to work when she called me and my dad in a panic. She had pulled over on the freeway, right in the gore point in Camarillo, one of the most dangerous places you could be. One of my friends at the sheriff's department had died in the line of duty in that exact spot just 4 years earlier. At the time, she thought she was having a panic attack, but not just any panic attack. This was a level she'd never experienced before. My dad and I rushed out to get her. Being on the side of the freeway where my friend died was unsettling, to say the least, especially since my mom had just been sitting there, waiting for us due to an unknown medical reason. My dad drove my mom home, and I drove her car back. She kept saying she felt anxious, her chest tight, and she just couldn't have driven another mile. We wouldn't find out until a year later, after an MRI, that this was actually her first stroke. November 7th, 2018. As a former deputy sheriff, I've always kept an ear on county radio traffic and an eye on apps like Citizen. Just after 11:20 p.m., I started getting alerts. Possible active shooter at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks, less than 4 miles from my house. The deputy side of me was desperate to rush there and help, but that would likely make things harder, so I had to stay and listen to things as they happened. Borderline wasn't just another place in the news to me. It was where we'd all go for 18 and over nights, where you'd start to feel like an adult for the first time, where the music was loud, the dance floor was always moving, and you couldn't walk 2 feet without seeing someone you knew. Every Halloween, I looked forward to being there, the costumes, the energy, the fun. Before it was Borderline, it had been a family restaurant my parents took me to as a kid. That building had history for me. At first, the details were hazy. Then came reports that just didn't sound real, that the inside looked like a war zone. But it was real. That night, a 28-year-old U.S. Marine Corps veteran entered Borderline during their college country night, a night that I used to attend. Around 260 people were inside, many of them students from Pepperdine, Cal Lutheran, CSU Channel Islands, and Moorpark College. He was armed with a Glock 45, high-capacity magazines, smoke bombs, and even fireworks. He walked in the front door, killed the cashier, and opened fire. 61 shots in total. Some people hid in the bathrooms or the attic. Others smashed windows to escape. By 11:19 p.m., CHP officers were already alerted by people fleeing. Within minutes, Ventura County Sheriff Sergeant Ron Helis arrived and went inside. The shooter, watching security camera feeds from an office, ambushed them. Helis was hit multiple times, and tragically, a round from the CHP officer's rifle also struck him. That wound proved fatal. Sergeant Helis wasn't just a name to me. He was someone I had worked with as a deputy sheriff, someone both my parents had worked with and deeply respected. The attack ended at 11:38 p.m. when the shooter took his own life. 12 people were dead, including Sergeant Helis. The next morning, during a press conference, the sheriff, who was about to retire, described the inside of Borderline with one word: hell. And less than 12 hours later, the Woolsey fire broke out, a fire that would prove to be one of the most destructive in California history. That day and into the night, the winds were relentless, 50 to 60 miles per hour, and where we live is surrounded by parkland. The chance of the fire reaching us was real. Back at our house, we were watching everything unfold on the news. The flames were moving fast, so Anna packed up the boys and headed to her parents' house in the next city over. Roads towards her parents' house were already closed, so she had to take the long way around. 10 miles took her over an hour. Lynn and Gary, Anna's parents, were watching the fire from their side, which at first seemed safer. But as Anna drove into the valley, a new fire broke out right by the freeway behind her. That suddenly put Lynn and Gary's neighborhood at risk too. Anna arrived at her parents' house safely, and everything seemed okay for the time being. We kept in constant communication. I stayed home to watch over our neighborhood. By night, the power was out. Many people had evacuated to local hotels that had backup generators. When the sun went down, it was unsettling. The streets were blacked out, the air thick with smoke, and the orange glow of flames lit the mountains like a warning. The wind carried the smell of burning brush and ash right into your lungs, scratching your throat with every breath. I walked the neighborhood with a flashlight, letting every neighbor know that it was me, keeping an eye on the houses. Evacuation notices came through, but after everything we'd been through, I wasn't about to leave our home unprotected. Walking those empty streets felt like an end-of-days scene, the kind you only see in the movies, except it was real life, and I was in the middle of it. For the time being, Anna, the boys, Lynn, Gary, and my niece, Kaylee, were safe back at Anna's parents' house. But soon, the smoke started creeping into their area. The house backs up to a parkland that had never burned before, but this time the police came through telling residents to get ready to evacuate. Lynn and Gary have chickens and didn't want to chance it, so it was time to load up. The smoke was getting thick, but the fire hadn't reached yet. With the evacuation call looming, Anna made the call to head back home, chickens and all. We ended up converting the boys' playhouse into a chicken coop, right there in our backyard. Even though I was relatively fresh out of the hospital, whenever I'd see a flare-up or a random spot fire, I would try to put it out. One of my grandfathers was a firefighter, and growing up in a law enforcement family, I just had it in me that that's what I had to try to do. The fires continued to burn, and were making national news. Around this time, my mom's cousin John posted in a family Facebook group, checking on my grandparents during the fires. Melissa jumped in, claiming she had checked on them and got them to safety, then criticized everyone else for not doing the same, calling it absurd, saying that no one checks in on them. The truth was, Melissa was in Hawaii, as she states in her post she made. She didn't actually know what was going on. My grandparents, Chet and Lois, were never in harm's way in their home, which my mom knew from where she was working at the Emergency Operations Command Center in Ventura. But Melissa told them to evacuate anyway, sending them out with no destination. The freeways were closed in both directions. They ended up sleeping in their car in an IHOP parking lot by the side of the 101. Those businesses had been evacuated, restrooms closed. They would have been safe at home, but instead, she was posting online like she was the only one taking care of them, while actually putting them in unnecessary danger. At one point, my sister Tiffany and I even tried to find hotel rooms for them, but every hotel was either full or closed because of the evacuation zones, which didn't even include their home. Melissa was literally putting them in danger. At the fire's origin, the first report came at 2:24 p.m., a small brush fire near the Santa Susana Field Laboratory in Ventura County. The winds pushed it hard, and by nightfall, it had already jumped major roads. By the next day, it had crossed the 101 freeway near Calabasas, ripped through Liberty Canyon, and reached the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu. By November 10th, over 3,200 firefighters were on the ground. The Woolsey Fire had already burned more than 70,000 acres, forced nearly 300,000 people to evacuate, and destroyed entire neighborhoods in places like Malibu, Agora Hills, Oak Park, and Bell Canyon. The fire did not make it to my neighborhood, so yes, the chickens were fine. But at Lynn and Gary's house, the fire ripped through the park behind their house all the way up to their property and burned their trees. No losses, but literally too close to home. November 13th, 2018. I got a Facebook friend request from my grandfather, Chet. It was a second account. His original one was still active. My sister had already noticed he'd unfriended some people, including my dad, and when she asked him about it, he said he didn't even know how to do that. When I asked him about the second account, he said his old one just stopped working and he didn't have access to it anymore. But oddly, posts kept coming from the old account, usually sharing things from Melissa. At one point, we contacted someone who was able to give us a rough location of the IP address that was being used for that account. And guess what? It wasn't coming from my grandfather's house. It was pinging from Orange County, exactly where Melissa and Darren live. I explained to my grandfather that I'd been out of the loop with everyone because I'd had an eye stroke, spent some time in the hospital, gone through an outpatient TEE, and I was stuck at home wearing a heart monitor for 2 weeks. He told me he'd been trying to reach me to check and see how I was doing, but I never got a single call or message. I told him I'd been in and out of the ER and doctor's offices for almost 3 weeks now, and that the doctors had made it crystal clear. If I wanted to keep my eye and stay alive, I had to stay completely away from stress. At some point during November, I met my new cardiologist, someone who painted everything in such a dark light that I was genuinely scared. So scared that later she talked me into unnecessary procedures. One of them was the TEE I was talking about, a transesophageal echocardiogram. It uses ultrasound to create detailed images of the heart by inserting a specialized probe down the esophagus, allowing doctors to see the heart's structures up close. It's used to find valve problems, congenital heart defects, blood clots, infections, and atherosclerosis. I had to be sedated, my first time ever, and that was terrifying. It didn't take long, and in the end, the worst part was just a sore throat. But the fact that it showed nothing concerning, yet I still had to have it, didn't exactly give me peace of mind. Thanksgiving that year was strange. We had planned for it to be the first one hosted in our new home. My parents, Anna's parents, Anna's sister Bethany, and Bethany's kids came over. It was amazing to be able to host everyone at our house. We finally had enough room. Normally, If we were spending Thanksgiving at Anna's parents' house, we'd also visit my grandparents. That's just something we'd always done. But not this year. Melissa posted pictures of her, Darren, her daughter Amanda, and my grandparents together at my grandparents' house for Thanksgiving that year. She never really did this before. Her posts were more purposeful now. That picture definitely kept us away. A few of the photos showed her standing in front of a clock with the date on it, like a hostage holding a newspaper, except she wasn't the hostage. Darren was showing up more now too, making it impossible for us to visit if they were there. There was even a Facebook post from my grandmother thanking Melissa for the new bed, saying that Melissa spoils her. The truth was, my grandfather had bought another bed that cost over $10,000, but my grandmother didn't love it. Melissa liked it, so she bought another one, a cheaper one, for about half the price, and traded with them. Not exactly a gift, and definitely not the sweet gesture it was made to sound like. My grandmother later told us that she didn't even post that message. It's insane to me that Facebook was being used as a weapon. I thought back to when I used to think Melissa's obsession with Facebook was just an overreaction. Now that it was directed at us, I understood it better. Not the friendless drama, but the calculated lies aimed our way. It felt like every time we tried to breathe that month, something else was closing in. Between the loss of my grandma LeClaire, the medical scares, a mass shooting, a wildfire, and the never-ending family drama, there was no break, just wave after wave. Come back Sunday for the next episode of The Spencer Files.